Today's sponsor is Blue Chew, and they're giving you your first shipment totally free. All you have to do is pay $5 for shipping. Go to bluechew.com, use promo code DAVID. I've put the link right underneath this video. I've spoken to you before about different ways in which the world really has been laughing at us for a long time since Donald Trump became president. They laughed when we elected a president who thinks climate change is a Chinese hoax. They laughed that we elected a president who has no idea how economics or currency or trade or medicine or the Constitution or the law or public transit or any of it works. And they were laughing at us early during the coronavirus pandemic. And even as recently as a couple of weeks ago, many countries were laughing at us. I showed you about 10 days ago articles from all over the world, the Netherlands, South Africa, Peru, everywhere, ridiculing our moronic president for his comments about bleach injections and the other things he said during that press briefing. But they're not really laughing anymore. Now it has gone from laughter to concern to actual pity. The emails I have gotten over the last few days from our international viewers, people that used to be poking fun at Trump's idiotic claims about vaccines and the virus, they now write to me and say, David, we feel sorry for you that you are dealing with this in the United States. We feel sorry that you are in a situation where no matter what you do, even if you do the right things, even if you have the best intentions and the accurate understanding of what it is that's going on and what it is that's necessary to deal with this virus, we feel sorry for you because your federal government has failed. They are incompetent. There is no plan. There is just a series of lies and disinformation and confusion and bogus talking points. And there are even Republicans who are willing to tell the truth. They are increasingly agreeing. This is just some Republicans. Of course, most of them are actually behind Donald Trump. Check out Republican strategist Steve Schmidt explaining it. Again, this is a lifelong Republican strategist. Take a look.
Donald Trump has been the worst president this country has ever had. And I don't say that hyperbolically. He is. But he is a consequential president. And he has brought this country in 3 short years to a place of weakness that is simply unimaginable if you were pondering where we are today from the day where Barack Obama left office. And there were a lot of us on that day who were deeply skeptical and very worried about what a Trump presidency would be. But this is a moment of unparalleled national humiliation, of weakness. When you listen to the president, these are the musings of an imbecile, an idiot. And I don't use those words to name call. I use them because they're the precise words in the English language to describe his behavior, his comportment, his actions. We've never seen a level of incompetence, a level of ineptitude so staggering on a daily basis by anybody in the history of the country who's ever been charged with substantial responsibilities.
Steve Schmidt is sadly absolutely right. The presidency is deadly. And as more and more countries open up, it is us, people in the United States, who won't be allowed to fly into other countries because we're a mess here as other countries are actually dealing with the problem. As Trump talks about a super duper missile, we'll get to that later. That's actually a phrase that he used. His son goes on TV and says it's all going to disappear on election day because it's merely a fake political scandal by Democrats. As that goes on here, the world is taking pity on us for our failed leadership. I was trying over the weekend to think of an analogy to try to apply to this, because there are people who are analyzing this administration as if it were a normal administration. You have these people, some of them are so-called enlightened centrists who pretend to see both sides and find things they like in Trump and things that they dislike. You can't evaluate this president like you can other presidents. Here's an analogy I thought of that I'm workshopping and I want to try out on you. When someone says about Trump, well, you know, he has an unusual way of talking about the issues, but he's right on deregulation and he's right on trade, but maybe he's not the best guy on coronavirus. Imagine, okay, this is the analogy. Imagine I was playing in a chess tournament and I show up and I replace all the pawns on the board with queens that I take out of my pocket before the game starts. That's insane. And it's simultaneously making a mockery of the tournament. It's also cheating. I'm also either an idiot or a bad person for doing it. Imagine that a chess commentator sees me take 8 queens out of my pocket and put them on the board instead of the pawns and says, you know, David's strategy is unusual, but it's certainly an aggressive way to play the game. What? No, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, some players use the Spanish opening and others take queens out of their pocket and replace the pawns. We're not talking about the same thing here. So when these enlightened centrists and pragmatic conservatives and whoever else, when they pretend to do an analysis of Donald Trump's presidency as if it were even remotely normal, they're failing the sniff test on principle. But there's another issue here. With very few exceptions, in the Republican Party, they are mostly just enabling this. There are a few Republicans who have taken a stand and are saying this can't happen, right? You've got people like Mitt Romney, who's a current senator from Utah, Republican. You have George Conway, a lifelong Republican, Steve Schmidt, lifelong Republican strategist. There are a few other Republicans, I can't name them all, who have not softened their view on Trump, and they are straight up saying this is not acceptable, this is not normal. This can't be dealt with in normal terms because normal terms don't apply. I'm not talking about them. But for the most part, Republicans in Congress, in the House and Senate, have enabled this. Most Republican governors have enabled this. So Trump is not alone to blame here. We have to blame the 63 million Americans that voted for Donald Trump. Yes, they are to blame. It doesn't matter whether you call them bad people or stupid, or they are to blame. Their actions are to blame for what we are dealing with right now. Of course, Trump is to blame, but the Republican Party that mostly continues to enable him, that even before the impeachment trial had already decided we're voting to acquit Donald Trump on impeachment charges, they have to be held accountable as well. We have the opportunity to hold every single one of the Republicans in the House accountable in November. We have an opportunity to hold the Republicans that are up for re-election in the Senate in November, which is of the 34 up for re-election. I forget the exact number of Republicans, but a number of Republicans are up for re-election in November. They have to be held accountable as well. We sadly have to now have another sad conversation. Today's show at the start is kind of a bummer, but we're going to get to some interesting things if you bear with me. We have to have a really serious conversation about the growing reality that the conspiracy theorists are, to a great degree, winning right now surrounding coronavirus. Now, I want to be really careful here. This includes coronavirus-related conspiracy theories, but I'm also talking about conspiracy theories that are being floated now to distract from the administration's failed handling of the virus. So I'm going to talk about both things. And I should be clear that when I say the conspiracy theorists are winning, I don't mean most people believe the conspiracies. That's not what I mean. But there's an asymmetric priority here. When I say the conspiracy theorists are winning, what I mean is enough people are either falling for the conspiracy theories or reporting endlessly on the conspiracy theories, such that it is wreaking havoc on the overall dissemination of real information and distracting from a focus on what matters. And that's why when this pond scum nonsense starts to spread, they don't need to get 51% of the population to believe it. They don't even need to get 20% of the population to believe it. They only need to do enough to wreak havoc in the media and distract from the real scandals. Really good piece in The Atlantic by Jeffrey Goldberg, which actually goes into this and it goes further. And it says the impact of these conspiracy theories winning is not just on coronavirus, but it's actually a bigger challenge to Enlightenment values and to reality itself, which we're going to dig into. There's also a piece in Vox by Sean Illing, which talks about sort of the media's handling component and how Trump uses the media to spread his conspiratorial disinformation, specifically to distract from his failings. And we're going to talk about that as well. So first of all, let's start with Jeffrey Goldberg's piece in The Atlantic. And in that piece, Jeffrey Goldberg says, Trump does not defend our democracy from the ruinous consequences of conspiracy thinking. Instead, he embraces such thinking. A conspiracy theory, birtherism, was his pathway to power. And in office, he warns of the threat of the deep state with the ferocity of a QAnon disciple. He has even begun to question the official coronavirus death toll, which he sees as evidence of a dark plot against him. How is he different from Alex Jones, from the conspiracy manufacturers of Russia and the Middle East? He lives in the White House. That is one main difference. This improbable question, how did a person with a weakness for conspiratorial thinking achieve the presidency, might be among the most consequential of the coming election, which is not merely a political contest, but a referendum on Enlightenment values and on reality itself. Nonsense is nonsense, except when it kills. And conspiracy thinking, especially when advanced by the President of the United States, is an existential threat. And so when you think of all the ways in which Trump supports this new conspiracism, there are many. So yeah, as Goldberg points out, the big foray into politics for Trump was birtherism against Barack Obama. This idea that Barack Obama may not have been born in the United States, may not be, may not qualify for the presidency because of the birthplace of his parents. But his entire trade politics were also based around these sort of go too far ideas about China. And it went simply from being about currency and intellectual property theft into climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. We see it front and center on the virus, everything from Trump pushing chloroquine is the cure. What do you have to lose from very, very early on to it will just go away, to the entire thing that we've seen recently from Donald Trump about just ignoring the fact that there are people dying every single day from this. And of course, with conspiracies, when there's a grain of truth, as there almost always is, it helps the conspiracy to grab a foothold. We've talked about this before. The virus did originate in China. It just didn't come from a lab. It wasn't man-made in a bioweapon. Trump says it will go away. Well, I mean, of course, at some point, it will either kill everybody who's not immune, and then you've got herd immunity and everyone who died has already died. Like, eventually it'll go away, or we'll get a vaccine or whatever the case may be. Eventually it will go away. That doesn't mean that we just open up the economy and do nothing. And then Trump says, well, some governors are being heavy-handed. That becomes armed protests by the same people who think Bill Gates is involved in some nefarious way to fund a vaccine that will lead to a dystopian population control nightmare that Bill Gates will be in charge of. And again, just enough people fall for this stuff that it takes attention away from what matters and from what's real, keeping people safe, understanding when Trump is lying to us, minimizing damage to the economy in a responsible way, working together to get past the lockdown phase. And of course, just enough people fall for this stuff that it starts to get media attention, and that's how they win. They don't need to be proven right. They merely need to justify their existence by getting just enough attention. And where we are seeing it now front and center is with this Obamagate stuff. I don't plan on covering Obamagate very much. I'm going to do a clip or two here or there for the purposes of debunking what's being said. But this is how Trump controls the media. Sean Illing for Vox writes, Trump has been able to essentially win merely by turning the last week of right-wing media and even some centrist and standard corporate media into adjudications and debates about Obamagate. Any minute that is spent talking about Obamagate is a minute that they are distracting their viewers from the mounting death toll, the failed response, the fact that South Korea and Taiwan got it under control right away and we did not. We still have inadequate testing levels. And it's a tactic that Steve Bannon, I don't know that Steve Bannon invented it. Certainly, he probably did not. But he uses it, and it's called zone flooding. Flood the zone with this stuff and force the media to cover it. You don't need to convince a huge portion of the public. You just need to get coverage and get people arguing on one side of Obamagate or on the other side of Obamagate. And the media have really not adapted to be able to handle this. As Sean Illing says, the media aren't gatekeeping the BS stories. And to some degree, media are allowing more and more discussion of Obamagate because it's ratings. That's number one. To some degree, media want more and more discussion of Obamagate because if they don't talk about it, it'll trigger a round of BS attacks against them. Look at how biased they are. Fox is covering Obamagate. Fake news CNN and the Washington Post won't cover it. So part of it is they don't want to be seen. They're scared of being accused of suppressing the story altogether. And the mere discussion causes what we call the illusory truth effect. Even if most media outlets are bringing it up to debunk it, exposure to the claims alone will get some people believing them. Even if you do what you believe is the responsible thing, you only bring up Obamagate to debunk it as the bogus conspiracy theory that it is. You are exposing more people to the claim, and more people may end up believing the conspiracy theory. So at least for now, I'm not going to participate in the Obamagate stuff. We're going to talk about it only at an absolute minimum. And we will talk about it when there is, a relevant implosion by the right related to it. Our audience also is not a general audience. It's people already following this stuff, but they win when they get enough of the population talking about this stuff, even if they're not changing minds. And the real impact is that large swaths of the country reopening in the middle of a pandemic are doing so partially because of these conspiracy theories about everything from Bill Gates and government tyranny and heavy-handed this and that, Obamagate distraction. All of this stuff is playing a role in getting policy to be what they want rather than what public health dictates. Let me know what you think. I'm on Twitter at dpacman, and we'll have a few types of follow-up on this coming up later today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This episode was sponsored by Blue Chew, giving my viewers their first shipment totally free when you go to bluechew.com and use promo code DAVID. It's just a reality that many men, regardless of age, can sometimes benefit from a boost in confidence, a little bit of performance help. Blue Chew is the first chewable tablet with the same FDA-approved ingredients as Viagra and Cialis. Blue Chew being a chewable tablet means it starts working twice as fast as a pill. It's prescribed online. You spend a couple minutes with a short questionnaire. A licensed doctor reviews the information, decides if a prescription is right for you. It's then shipped directly to your home in discreet packaging, no awkward visits to the doctor's office or pharmacy. Plus, it's also cheaper than getting it at a pharmacy. When you go to bluechew.com and use promo code DAVID, you will get your first shipment completely free. Just pay $5 shipping. That's promo code DAVID to get your first shipment of Blue Chew completely free. And I've put the link right underneath this video.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Monica Bergstrom and Deborah Pear. Thank you so much to both of you. Also want to say thanks to Nancy Myers, who is today's longtime sustaining member of the day. Nancy's been a member just shy of 5 years, and I really appreciate everybody's support. Grab a membership at joinpakman.com. You'll get the daily bonus show. Today we have an incredible bonus show. Pat has what we are calling Coronavirus Displacement Part 2 to tell us about. I will also give you an update. I've made a 180 on some of my recent prepping, thanks to some of our members. All of that and more on today's bonus show, and you can get instant access by signing up at joinpakman.com. We could end the pandemic as a pandemic by the 4th of July if we took action right now. Wouldn't mean we have no new cases, certainly, but we could end the pandemic phase, I guess we would call it. And I know that many of you know we've already missed a number of opportunities to do this. Back on March 5th, I'm being very generous by looking at March 5th. We had all the information we needed about the spread of the virus. We should have taken immediate action. Donald Trump should have said to all 50 governors, listen, we need a 50-state stay-at-home order. We have some very, very difficult days ahead, but we will be better off if we all do this now. Instead, on March 5th, we did nothing. On March 5th, we ended up doing only 500 or so tests. By March 15th, we were still only doing about 1,000 tests a day. By March 25th, we were finally up to 80,000 tests, which was still not nearly enough. We were so behind. And still to this day, we aren't doing enough tests and we don't have any federal contact tracing initiative. So opportunities have come and gone. But once again, we have an opportunity in front of us to deal with what we are dealing with right now. And we could be in very good shape nationally by July 4th. Alex Tabarrok and Pooja Olhaver wrote a really good piece in the Washington Post outlining the bipartisan plan that they participated in putting together. And it's important that this plan considers the medical and the economic. I've been taking the economic seriously from day one. The right has been having a grand old time framing leftists as not caring about the economy, as not caring about unemployment, not caring about economic destruction. The truth is, I and most serious leftists have been concerned from day one with the economy. And the reality is that 6 months of rolling lockdowns in some parts of the country, some open, close, that's not going to be good for the economy either. There's a plan that's been written, and the testing element is a big part of that plan. We need to dramatically increase testing. How innovative? It's not surprising, but we are still not testing enough. But the test levels are very specifically outlined by this plan. We need to be testing everyone who has symptoms and all of their contacts and have enough capacity for what we call surveillance testing. People just go in even without symptoms because there is such asymptomatic spread. We need everyone who has the disease and their contacts to self-isolate. We may need hotel rooms for people to be able to self-isolate depending on their situation at home. We may need stipends for people who are self-isolating while they cannot work. And what the plan does that is really important is it divides the country into 3 types of zones: green zones, yellow zones, and red zones. And the plan acknowledges, which a lot of right-wingers want, that rural Montana doesn't have to do the same thing that New York City needs to do. Green zone would mean fewer than 1 in 36,000 are infected. You can do large gatherings in green zones. You don't need a mask in green zones unless you are part of or around folks who are in vulnerable populations. You need 1 test per day for every 10,000 people in green zones and 5 contact tracers for every 100,000 people. That is not a lot for the green zones. Now, right now, there are not very many green zones. 2 weeks ago, we could have had 19 million Americans in green zones based on our testing levels. Right now, we don't have any active green zones that are meeting these requirements. Then we get to yellow zones. Yellow zones are for most of the country right now. 298 million Americans right now would be in what we call yellow zones. That's where the disease prevalence is somewhere between 0.002% and 1%, okay? In the yellow zones, the economy can reopen, mandatory masks for everyone, and you need 2,500 tests for each daily death, plus much more contact tracing. You need to have enough contact tracing to contact every person who's been in touch with an infected individual within 12 hours. Why within 12 hours? Because if you wait 3 days, it's too late. And those people have been going around potentially spreading the disease. So, for example, based on the last few days of deaths, New Jersey would need 250,000 tests per day. But Maryland would only need 87,000 tests per day. These are much bigger numbers than what we have, but these are not cartoonishly high numbers based on the models that we've seen. So you've got your green zones and your yellow zones, then you've got your red zones. Red zones are more than 1% of the population is infected. Right now, there are about 30 million people in that situation. That's just under 10% of the country. So in those red zones, you have everything that the yellow zones have in terms of testing and tracing, but you also have a stay-at-home order. If you follow it, the red zone becomes yellow relatively quickly, by 4 weeks in most analyses. And then you move to yellow, and then the whole country could be at minimum at yellow by the 4th of July. That means the whole country could be open, although yellow zones would still have more precautions like mandatory masks. And we could be at green by the end of the summer. We're not even close on testing. We're now testing about 350,000, 375,000 a day. We need somewhere between 3 and 5 million a day. And based on current numbers, we're nowhere near that. This can be done, but we're way behind. If we started today, we could be in pretty good shape for moving red zones to yellow and yellow to green heavily around the 4th of July. Seems to be no political desire at the federal government. Trump's acting like we won. He's talking about super duper missiles, but this is a plan that works. Test, trace, and isolate. South Korea succeeded with it at the earliest. New Zealand did it. Taiwan did it. Greece had a milder version and they still did it, although it took a little bit longer. Greece is looking at opening up for travel very, very soon. Prevention is cheaper than the cure. Testing is cheaper than both the economic destruction and the costs of treating way more sick people. Here's another plan. The plan is based on right now. It's mid-May. We could do this. We could be in very good shape by July 4th. You all know that I don't subscribe to the polling conspiracy theories that you can't trust polls, that polling is fake, that polling is somebody at an office making up numbers, that the polls only call old people on landlines. I don't subscribe to any of those conspiracy theories because they're bogus. And we know that they're bogus by looking at methodology. Well done polling, especially when you average a bunch of good polls, you get a really good sense of where a race is. Look at 2016. Hillary was leading the national polls by 3.2. She won by 2.1. That's within the margin of error. The polls were correct nationally in 2016. Now, something really dishonest was done by CNN last week with a poll that they did. And I want to call it out. CNN announced that in battleground states, Trump is winning 52 to 45. Now, as a savvy news consumer, you should immediately say, what does that mean? 52 to 45 across battleground states. Are you saying that you added up all of the different people in those states and in total Trump is winning by 7? Do you mean that his average lead in each state is 7? Are you weighting those results for the populations of what does that mean? Because states are of different populations, different electoral vote values. Well, if you look at page 9 of the CNN poll, the methodology page actually says, for the subset of 583 adults living in the 15 battleground states, there is a margin of error of 5.3 percentage points. So first of all, you've got a sample that across 15 different battleground states is only 583 people total. Now, that could be 38 people per state, not a good sample size. Some states maybe had more of that sample and some less because of their population. And the margin of error is 5.3. So this could be essentially a tie, or Trump could be leading by 12. This tells us very little. But the most important thing is that this poll, when it says Trump's winning in these 15 states by 7, it doesn't tell us how far ahead Trump or Biden are in any particular state. What I mean is Georgia's included in these 15 states. Well, Trump's winning by Georgia by around 8 right now, 7 or 8. Is Georgia even really a battleground? Georgia has 16 electoral votes. It's not really in play for Joe Biden. Why is it included and how is it skewing these results? Some other states that are included are actual battleground states. Like, for example, Nevada. It's actually sort of close. Biden is +4, but Nevada only has 6 electoral votes. So how are you weighting these different states? And what does it mean that Trump is winning by 7 across the states? This poll doesn't have very useful information. And unfortunately, it was picked up on by a bunch of right-wing media and even some left-wing media, and it is being spread like some kind of gospel. So let's do something that makes more sense. Let's look at each state one by one and then total up the electoral vote. So when you actually break this down, Joe Biden is winning Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Wisconsin. And then on the other hand, Donald Trump is winning in Georgia. Donald Trump is winning in North Carolina, in Ohio. The point is, when you add up the electoral votes in these supposed battleground states, regardless of the combined population, As of right now, Joe Biden would get close to 75% of the electoral votes from these 15 battleground states. Now, I want to be really clear. This is just a snapshot. It's a moment in time. This is not about Biden's got this. It's not about staying home in November. It's not about Biden's going to win. The point is, when I simply say Trump's winning by 7 in these 15 battleground states, you then look at each state, you see, wait a second, Biden's winning most of the states and most of the electoral votes right now. So polling is valuable in two ways, and this isn't either of them. Polling is valuable to be able to say, what does one state look like? Or polling is valuable to say, what is the national popular vote looking like? Giving us what seems to be a blended popular vote for 15 states where you call them battlegrounds, but some like Georgia are not considered battleground states. It is deceptive. It tells us nothing, and it actually fuels uncritical reporting from left, right, and center media outlets that only confuses people even more. Let's not fall for it. That's why it's important to understand what was done here. Make sure you're following The David Pakman Show on Instagram at David Pakman Show. Lastly, my personal Instagram, david.pakman. I took apart a whole watermelon yesterday, posted it to my Instagram, and people are losing their minds. David, that's not how you break down a watermelon. David, you're using the wrong kind of knife. David, your hair looks stupid. David, I didn't know you were left-handed. That's really beta of you. Check out the watermelon video on my Instagram, david.pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%. Vote soon 18.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
All right, listen, guys, I've been debating whether or not to do this segment over the weekend because I don't want to, number one, confuse people. I don't want to spread wrong information. I don't want to say something that might get somebody to take a risky behavior or to put people at risk of catching coronavirus. But at the same time, it wouldn't be honest for me to keep this information from you and not to tell you about it and not to get your thoughts on it. So I am coming to you today not to tell you that I know what's going on with lockdowns versus state reopenings, but merely to tell you there are clearly things going on that we don't understand, or at least that I don't understand. I won't speak for others, but I'll tell you that I don't understand. Let me give you an example. California has been closed for months. Texas reopened in late April. Their curves for cases and deaths are looking very, very similar. And again, please understand, I'm not saying anything about lockdowns or reopenings. I'm making no medical or economic claims. I am merely saying something is not making sense, and I don't know what it is. And I want to be super careful because I want to learn what it is that's going on. So let's look at California and Texas. California and Texas ordered lockdowns right around the same time. It was about March 20th. From what we saw, California's lockdown was more strict than that in Texas, and California's lockdown seemed to be taken more seriously by people in California than the Texas lockdown was taken by people living in Texas. The California lockdown has now been going on 2 months. Texas mostly started reopening on April 28th, I believe it was. We're going to put the cases up on the screen. Now, there is no doubt that if you look back to early May, the Texas cases have started to climb at a modest rate. And indeed, when you look at raw numbers, Texas has had some of its higher single-day new case numbers over the last week or 10 days. But the curve is not very different in Texas than it is in California. Where you look at California, which has been on lockdown for 2 full months now, they also are starting to see some of their highest case numbers in the last week. So I want to be thorough here. I can imagine explaining this in a bunch of different ways. So let me give you one example. Have the states simply been ramping up testing, and Texas has been ramping up testing by more than California? So the increased cases are merely a result of testing more. Well, to some degree, that's true. Both California and Texas are testing more now than they were at the start of the lockdown. So to some degree, you could say both California and Texas are seeing more cases because they are testing more. But how does a state that's been on a lockdown for 2 months have an almost identical curve, not raw numbers, but an almost identical curve to a state that's been open for 3 weeks? I don't know. I don't pretend to understand. Now, could it be that in Texas, even though they're open, people are still doing a lockdown? And in California, even though they're still locked down, more people are ignoring the lockdown? I don't know. I don't pretend to know. What if we look at deaths instead of cases? Once again, it looks similar. The curves are similar. California has had way more deaths in the aggregate. California also has more deaths per capita. California was an early hotspot. It has more flights to Asia, more people coming back and forth from Asia. It has a bigger population. But when we look at the curve, the shape of the curve, we are seeing relatively high numbers of deaths in California, about a plateau. And it's not that different in Texas. Texas had its highest death numbers about a couple of weeks ago. California had them about 4 weeks ago. So I don't pretend to know what is going on, but I want to try to think through some of the ideas. I already mentioned the case numbers are affected by testing. Maybe the curves are similar because testing has ramped up similarly and it's not reflective of real case numbers. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. Then you look at deaths, though, and the curves look similar. So maybe the deaths haven't yet peaked in Texas, and California's have peaked, are in a slow decline, and right now they're kind of crossing. Okay, that's possible. Maybe we'll know that in another 10 or 14 days. Another argument I saw, maybe Texas is simply lying, right? Like, okay, I mean, listen, I don't put it past them, but in order to hide case and death numbers while putting out fake testing numbers, or maybe the testing numbers are real, then that would mean that the deaths and testing and the deaths and cases are out of proportion. It's a coordinated conspiracy. So I don't, listen, we heard Florida was at one point hiding cause of death. It's a pretty big conspiracy, and I don't know that Texas is even competent enough to get away with it. Is it possible the heat is a factor? Well, it's hot in a lot of California as well, and it has been for several months. Do the lockdowns not work? I mean, no, we have information that show lockdowns do reduce case numbers and deaths in the aggregate, but is it possible that there's a natural curve, there's some kind of natural timing to the virus that has a similar trajectory regardless of policy? The lockdown saves people in numbers, but the trajectories end up being similar. I don't know. I truly don't know. There was one paper that suggested that. Again, I mentioned, is it possible that even though California has stricter lockdown and Texas is reopened, maybe Californians are ignoring it and some Texans are staying home and it's sort of evening out? Is there evidence of that? I don't know. I have no idea. What about maybe I'm cherry picking by only looking at California and Texas? Okay. Let's compare two other states, New Jersey and Florida. New Jersey is part of the big New York hotspot and the big New York lockdown. Florida famously started reopening stuff weeks ago. The trajectories for cases in Florida and New Jersey are also very similar. Certainly, Florida hasn't seen the same recent decline that New Jersey had, but they both went down for a bit and they've both popped recently. Could it just be testing? Well, maybe, but it's still a similar trajectory. Looking at deaths in New Jersey and Florida, it's a very similar curve. Now, to be super clear, the numbers are different. The death numbers in Jersey are way higher. They were an early hotspot, but the curves are similar with similar timing. So you know I never lie to you. I've noticed this. I'm bringing it to you. And I want to know more. Now, the answer could be every place is doing poorly because of the disastrous federal response. We have no national contact tracing in place. So even the lockdowns only help a little bit. I don't know. I don't have the answer, but this is the data that I'm seeing. I want to hear from you. What do you think is going on here? Heading into the weekend, President Donald Trump announced an upcoming new super duper missile. That is not my term, that's his. Asked about it, his press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, was saying she doesn't know anything about it. You got to go talk to the Pentagon. So late last week, Donald Trump had an event in the Oval Office to announce the Space Force flag. This is the newest sort of sub-branch of the military, not really a branch. It encompasses the worst of nationalism, the military-industrial complex, unbridled capitalism, and Trump's delusions of grandeur all at one. It puts all of those together. There was a really funny moment when Trump went over to take a picture with the Space Force flag. This is reality as far as we can tell. And something weird happened. The guy holding the flag sort of flinched and almost dropped the flag. Trump flinches. It's all a comedy of errors. It's very visual, I admit, but let's take a look at it.
That's fantastic. Isn't that great?
So that was something. But to get to the real disaster porn, here is Trump announcing the super duper missile.
Incredible military equipment at a level that nobody's ever seen before. We have no choice. We have to do it with the adversaries we have out there. We have, I call it the super duper missile. And I heard the other night 17 times faster than what they have right now. Then you take the fastest missile we have right now. You've heard Russia has 5 times, and China's working on 5 or 6 times. We have one 17 times, and it's just gotten the go-ahead. 17 times faster, if you can believe that, General. That's something, right?
Sounds like we could really kill a bunch of people at once with that thing, huh? Really, really exciting stuff. So Trump says 17 times faster than what we have right now. So I believe that our fastest missile right now is the BrahMos, also referred to as the PJ-10. That has a maximum speed of Mach 3, meaning about 3 times the speed of sound. That's like 2,300 miles per hour. So 17 times faster than that, rough numbers, that's Mach 51. That would be about 39,000 miles per hour. That sounds weird. I don't know about that. About an hour later, Donald Trump's press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, was asked about this. The question alone was hilarious, and here's her answer.
The president earlier in the Oval Office said that the Pentagon was developing a, quote, super duper missile. Pentagon was asked about that shortly after the president made his remarks and declined to comment, referring it back to the White House. So I'm wondering if you can say what the president was describing.
Yeah, I would just refer you back to the president remarks in the Pentagon. I don't have any new information on that at this point.
So the Pentagon, as you heard there, referred questions back to the White House. White House said nothing. They said go back to the Pentagon. And eventually all that we got out of the Pentagon was DOD is working on developing a range of hypersonic missiles. No word on whether it's 17 times faster than our current fastest missile. Nick Schifrin from PBS NewsHour said Trump maybe was referring to the AGM-183, which is a hypersonic missile approved for purchase by the Air Force in February. So there's some obvious low-hanging fruit here, like Trump sounds like an idiot talking about a super-duper missile. There's low-hanging fruit in this may be classified. Trump is, again, maybe being irresponsible with classified info. That's nothing new. The real story for me here is look at everything that's going on, and we're spending who knows how much money on more new weapons that are marginally better at killing more people more quickly than what we have right now. We still don't have enough coronavirus testing. We still don't have a national tracing initiative, contact tracing initiative for the virus. We have people who got $1,200 and they are arguing about whether anybody is going to even get anything else, although it's starting to go in that direction. It's the latest, just disgusting enumeration of our misguided priorities by the federal government. And as usual, another day, just another embarrassment from Donald Trump, just a chorus of ridicule, a barrage of embarrassment after this once again.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The continued war against a 79-year-old infectious disease doctor who has worked for 6 presidents continues. I'm talking about Dr. Anthony Fauci, continues to be the target of protesters. Remember a couple of weeks ago, a chant of "Fire Fauci" broke out at one of these reopen protests. Here's the audio and video reminder of that. Well, it's getting even worse. They're going from "Fire Fauci" now to signs that say "Hang Fauci, hang Fauci." Those have started to pop up at protests. Here's one from a Long Island, New York protest over the weekend, which says, "Hang Fauci, hang Gates, open up all our states." Very poetic, very nice rhyming, but completely horrifying. Hang Gates, of course, refers to Bill Gates, who's donating huge sums of his own money to find a vaccine. He's being regularly attacked for it. He's at the center of multiple conspiracy theories, arguing that his intentions are actually nefarious. Will there actually be any accountability for the conspiracy theorists that have spent months spreading this nonsense? Because this is a complete backslide from just basic Enlightenment values. Now, I want to be careful because some of these enlightened centrists and so-called classical liberals, they love to fetishize talking about Enlightenment values. And then they argue wildly that the left on Twitter is falling back from Enlightenment values by trying to do things to prevent hate speech or whatever. We don't do that here, okay? I don't know the last time I mentioned Enlightenment values. This is not something I've discussed that much before. But the anti-science cesspool that has become the coronavirus protests, it actually is a fight against basic Enlightenment values of rationalist philosophy, a respect of science, not fetishizing science, just a respect for the scientific process and what it provides us, respect of the law, importantly. So much of what we now take for granted. Consider that the terrorists don't have to attack us anymore. Why would they? We are destroying ourselves from the inside as this battle has been created between those who understand and respect the scientific process and who understand what is an expert. This is not about phony experts, but actually the difference between Dr. Anthony Fauci and some guy on the internet with a blog, right? And those who peddle conspiracies and mass gather believe that they know better than actual doctors. This is not the crisis of expertise, which is something I've not been shy about covering. Imagine the same people rightly criticizing the signs and the chants of death to America elsewhere in the world. They are the same ones who chant "Fire Fauci" and hold up signs that say "Hang Fauci." We're doing the job of the terrorists for them. I would even go further when it comes to the country being united against the common enemy. After 9/11, Americans were by and large briefly united, very united. It didn't last that long because George W. Bush turned 9/11 into a war against Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11 at all. But there was a period there, the end of 2001, when George W. Bush went to the rubble at Ground Zero. His approval rating spiked. I think it was 86 or even 90% in late 2001. And the country was united. This could have happened with coronavirus. I've said it before. If on March 5th, Trump makes an FDR-like speech, I'm not endorsing everything FDR did, okay? So before you even start sending me messages about that, but an FDR-like speech where he speaks to the nation and says, we have difficult times ahead. We do. The economics are going to be tough for a little while, but we must come together. We need stay at home from 50 governors for 60 days. You know, maybe at the time it would have been 30, and then it ends up getting extended for 30. We're going to come out on the other side. We are going to come out with few deaths. We will start to reopen and rebuild. That ship sailed, but with it also sailed the administration may be presiding over a rational reaction. Instead, we've seen Donald Trump sort of coyly support the protesters, drawing a line in the sand, separating his view from that of the scientists, criticizing everybody under the sun about his own mishandling, from Obama to governors to Democrats, whoever else, while lying about testing and everything else. This doesn't bode well for our future. Other countries are realizing it. I told you that their laughter has mostly turned to horror and pity at this point, and I don't know how we dig out of it, my friends. I really don't. Over the weekend, Donald Trump's least intelligent son that we are aware of, that's Eric Trump, made some completely ridiculous and absolutely irresponsible comments. He went on Fox News to the program of Judge Jeanine Pirro and said just a series of wacky things that were either lies or wrong. He also alleged a number of baseless conspiracies. So let's dive right into the first clip here.
76 days to be exact away. And listen, Biden loves this. Biden can't go out on stage without making some horrible blunder. I mean, even from his basement, he's making awful gaffes every single day. So his campaign's thrilled that he's not going out there. And they think they're taking away Donald Trump's greatest tool, which is being able to go into an arena and fill it with 50,000 people every single time, right? So they will.
So Trump was not filling arenas with 50,000 people. This seems to run in the family. Either everybody in the Trump family is really bad at estimating crowd size, or everybody in the Trump family is obsessed with lying about crowd size. And of course, Trump was doing plenty of rallies and many different events, regularly lying about the attendance, but he didn't have any 50,000 person rallies. And hilariously, when I tweeted about this, someone said it was so predictable. David, when he went to India, more than 50,000 people came out to see him. They came out for their prime minister, and half the crowd left when it was Trump's turn to speak. But if your one example is from a different country, then you know that you're failing. But this is minor. This is minor. I want to focus on the big thing. Here's the big lie, the big conspiracy from Eric Trump.
And you watch, they'll milk it every single day between now and November 3rd. And guess what? After November 3rd, coronavirus will magically all of a sudden go away and disappear, and everybody will be able to reopen. They're trying to deprive him of his greatest asset, which is the fact that the American people love him, the fact that he's relatable, the fact that he can go out there and draw massive crowds. Joe Biden can't get 10 people in a room. My father's getting 50,000 in a room.
So he again mentions the 50,000 person crowd thing. That's a lie. But most importantly, Eric Trump says after November 3rd, the virus will magically go away. He suggests that the entire global coronavirus pandemic is a hoax to keep Donald Trump from having rallies. Now, here is what's absolutely crazy about this. This is actually what Republicans did to Obama with Ebola in 2014. We had 4 cases of Ebola diagnosed in the United States. 2 of those came from abroad. We had 2 deaths, not 2% death. We had 2 deaths from Ebola in the United States. And it was all meant to be an attack on Obama. The day after the 2014 midterms, go back and check out my clips about this at the time, Republicans stopped talking about Ebola altogether. Now, the difference is that wasn't a global pandemic. This is. And yet Eric Trump believes the day after the election, this goes away. Then Eric Trump wraps up his comment with even more nonsense.
And they want to do everything they can to stop it. So make no mistake. To a lot of them, Jeanine, to a lot of them, this is a very cognizant strategy that they're trying to employ. It's no different than, again, the nonsense that they're trying to throw in the HOPE Act. It's no different than the mail-in voting that they want to do all these places. It's no different than wanting illegal immigrants to vote in our country. It is a cognizant strategy, and it's sad. And again, it's not going to be allowed to happen. We're going to win in November.
Okay, and then Trump goes on to say that reporters wearing masks is also part of the conspiracy. If this wasn't Trump's son, who you knew was merely doing disinformation propaganda, you would question his mental state and his connection to reality, given the wacky nature of what he's saying. Take a look.
Look at the White House press conference yesterday. They're all in there. They're criticizing everybody. Why isn't everybody wearing masks? Why isn't everybody wearing masks? All of a sudden, the press conference ends. They continue to roll a clip. And all the reporters are ripping off their masks in the room and going up to each other and speaking. I mean, wow. It's really insane. I mean, they're actually stoking fear in this country. They're doing a massive disservice. They're being totally disingenuous about the whole thing. But they're doing it for one reason. They want to hurt Trump. They tried to do it with the Russia thing. They tried to do it with, the Ukraine scandal. They tried to do it with impeachment. Now they're trying to do it with coronavirus. Yeah. They know they can't beat him. They know that Joe Biden can't beat him. He doesn't stand a chance. So what are they trying? They're trying to do anything that they can to stop him. They'll shut down the economy. They'll stop in-person voting.
So there it is, evidence that this is a totally fake, bogus, hoax political scandal that after a press briefing, reporters removed their masks. Real smoking gun you've got there, Eric. Now, let me go back for a moment to "It'll be over by November 3rd," because it's a hoax. I already told you this is what happened in 2014 with Ebola. You don't even need to go back to 2014, though. Go back to the 2018 midterms and that caravan of dangerous, criminal, illegal immigrants that were going to come here and kill and sexually assault people back in 2018. The midterms went by. You didn't hear about it again. This is the utmost projection. Democrats haven't created the coronavirus hoax to hurt Trump. It's a global pandemic. Republicans really did turn Ebola, which was a few localized outbreaks, into a political weapon against Barack Obama. Republicans really did turn the immigrant caravan, which posed no threat or challenge to our law enforcement at all in 2018, into fear-mongering to help Republicans in the midterms. They do that which they accuse Democrats of doing. It's called projection. And Eric Trump, sadly, he's just not as good as Donald Trump Jr. at convincing people with his lies. It's unfortunate. He's not the smart one. That we know. We have a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. Here's just a good question about so-called Obamagate. Take a listen to this.
Hi, David. I know the idea of Obamagate is ridiculous, but with being put to the test of specifics, I don't have a whole lot of answers other than it takes more than just a president asking the FBI to investigate a candidate for something to happen. You need judges to approve warrants and stuff like that. Could you help me with this, please?
Of course. Listen, everything you're saying is absolutely right. But the problem is you're allowing them to put you on the defensive. They are asserting Barack Obama committed crimes. Get a list of the crimes and the supporting evidence, and let's actually figure it out. Don't feel as though you now have to argue against. This is like, hey, listen, there are invisible purple elephants in the room with me right now, but they don't disturb the air. They make no noise. Why do you, if I assert that, why is it you now that has to disprove it? I need to bring something to the table. We could say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Apply whatever metaphor or proverb or whatever you want to it. Don't allow them to put you on the defensive. Let's start with, what are the crimes that Barack Obama committed? Who else committed the crimes? Let's look at the U.S. Code of Law, and we'll go from there. Don't fall for it otherwise. We have a fantastic bonus show for you today. We talked months ago about producer Pat's pandemic displacement, part 1, and it was crazy. Today, we will bring you the incredible story. I didn't even believe it when Pat emailed me about it, of producer Pat's pandemic displacement, part 2. You will not believe what we are going to tell you on today's bonus show. And also, I have some prepping updates that I know some of you are going to laugh at me about, but I'm going to come clean. I'm going to admit the truth on today's bonus show. Get instant access by becoming a member at joinpacman.com or a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode. Just a reminder, today's sponsor, Blue Chew, is giving you your first shipment completely free. All you have to do is pay $5 shipping. Go to bluechew.com and use the promo code DAVID. I've put a link right underneath this video.